I'm standing in my backyard watching my 5-year-old son Danny blow out candles shaped like dinosaurs, when my mother-in-law Vivian's voice cuts through the children's laughter like a knife through silk. "Well, Jessica, I suppose this is charming in its own way. Your child looks as cheap as his toys." The plastic dinosaur decorations suddenly feel heavy in my hands. The dollar store streamers I spent hours hanging seem to mock me. Vivian stands near the dessert table in her Chanel suit, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing dismissively at the spread of homemade cupcakes and fruit punch. My husband Marcus freezes mid-conversation with his college friends, his face draining of color. But it's the look in Danny's eyes, confusion mixed with the first seeds of shame, that makes something inside me finally crack wide open. What my mother-in-law doesn't know is that the lawyer standing 3 feet away, helping himself to a second cupcake while wearing jeans and a faded Superman t-shirt, just won me the biggest settlement in family court history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Reeves, though I was born Jessica Marlowe in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in South Philadelphia where the summer heat made sleep impossible and winter meant huddling around a space heater my mother salvaged from a neighbor's trash pile. I'm 34 years old, a single mother though technically still married, and until 6 months ago I was living in what my marriage counselor delicately called financial abuse dynamics, and what I called hell. Growing up poor teaches you things that wealthy people never understand. It teaches you that a dollar can stretch further than physics should allow. It teaches you that creativity flourishes under constraint. It teaches you that love and security have nothing to do with price tags, and everything to do with presence. My mother Elena worked 3 jobs to keep our small apartment, cycling through shifts at a diner, overnight stocking at a grocery store, and weekend housekeeping at a hotel near the airport. She smelled like coffee and bleach and the lavender hand cream she'd steal from the hotel's supply closets, and she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. My father left when I was 3, a detail so unremarkable in our neighborhood that mentioning it felt redundant. Most kids I knew had complicated family structures, a rotation of adults moving through their lives like seasons. What made us different was my mother's absolute determination that I would escape. Education was her religion, homework her holy text. While other parents in our building let their kids roam the streets until dark, my mother had me at the kitchen table every evening, reviewing multiplication tables and spelling words, her exhausted eyes scanning my worksheets for errors she'd make me correct until they disappeared. The Philadelphia public schools I attended were overcrowded and underfunded, metal detectors at the entrances and textbooks so outdated they still listed the Soviet Union as a current nation. But I had teachers who cared, Mrs. Robinson in 5th grade who noticed I devoured every book in our classroom library and started bringing me novels from her personal collection. Mr. Chen in 8th grade who saw something in my science fair project about water filtration and helped me enter it into regional competitions where I placed 3rd against kids from private schools with unlimited budgets. These small interventions created pathways I didn't know existed. By high school I'd figured out the system well enough to game it. I applied for every scholarship, every grant, every program designed to help first-generation college students. I worked part-time at the library, studied during slow periods, graduated valedictorian of my class with a full scholarship to Temple University. My mother cried at graduation, mascara running down her cheeks, gripping my hand so tightly I could feel her pulse through her palm. "We made it," she whispered. "We actually made it." Temple felt like a different universe. Students casually discussed summer homes and ski trips while I calculated whether I could afford both textbooks and groceries that week. I lived off campus in an apartment I shared with 3 other scholarship students, all of us working multiple jobs while maintaining the grade point averages our financial aid required. I studied accounting because it was practical, because numbers made sense in ways people often didn't, because I'd watched my mother struggle with predatory payday loans and credit card debt, and I understood that financial literacy was a form of power the poor were systematically denied. I met Marcus Wellington during my junior year at a networking event the business school hosted. He was getting his MBA, already working at his family's investment firm, attending the university more for the credential than any actual need for education. He stood out immediately, not just because he was handsome in that effortless way of people who've never worried about anything, but because he seemed genuinely interested when I talked about financial planning for low-income families, the passion project I developed into my senior thesis. Marcus was kind in those early days. He listened when I talked about growing up poor, never making me feel ashamed of the scholarship covering my tuition or the fact that I couldn't join him at expensive restaurants his friends frequented. He'd meet me at cheap diners near campus, claimed he preferred them to the stuffy places his parents liked. He drove a modest sedan rather than the sports car his father offered him. He seemed different from the wealthy kids I'd encountered, more grounded, more aware of his privilege. What I didn't recognize then was that Marcus was rebelling against his family by dating me, that I represented everything his mother Vivian despised, proof that her son could make his own choices. I was a statement, not a partner. By the time I understood this distinction, I was already pregnant. We married quickly, a small ceremony at City Hall that Vivian refused to attend. Marcus's father Richard showed up, shook my hand with uncomfortable formality, handed us an envelope containing a check for $10,000 along with a prenuptial agreement his lawyers had drafted. "Sign this or the check stays with me," he said without preamble. Marcus insisted it was just a formality, that his parents were old-fashioned about these things, that it didn't mean anything. I signed it in the courthouse bathroom, my hands shaking, my mother's warnings about rich people echoing in my head. Danny was born 7 months after our wedding, a perfect 6-pound miracle with Marcus's dark curls and my stubborn chin. For a brief window, maybe 6 weeks, we were happy. Marcus held his son with genuine wonder, took paternity leave from the family firm, talked about the future with optimism I wanted desperately to believe. Then Vivian arrived for her first visit. She swept into our modest apartment in Center City with the energy of a general surveying conquered territory. Her eyes catalogued everything, the second-hand furniture I'd refinished myself, the baby clothes from Target, the plastic changing table I'd assembled while Marcus was at work. She said nothing directly critical that first visit, just made small observations that landed like paper cuts. How quaint. I didn't realize people still used cloth diapers. Is this area considered safe? Her gift for Danny was a silver rattle from Tiffany that cost more than our monthly rent, presented with a smile that never reached her eyes. The next 5 years unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Marcus's position at Wellington Capital required longer hours, more travel, more integration into his family's world. Vivian orchestrated social events we were obligated to attend, charity galas and country club dinners where I was introduced as Marcus's wife from Philadelphia, the phrase somehow containing entire paragraphs of subtext about my unsuitability. The other wives were polite in that particular way wealthy women master, asking about my background with the tone anthropologists use when studying foreign cultures. Money became the weapon Vivian wielded with surgical precision. Marcus's salary was substantial, but it flowed through family accounts his mother controlled. She'd approve certain expenses, question others, require detailed justification for purchases she deemed inappropriate. When I wanted to enroll Danny in a Montessori preschool near our apartment, she insisted he attend the Wellington family's traditional preparatory program in the suburbs, the same one Marcus attended, where tuition cost $40,000 annually and parents arrived in chauffeur-driven cars. I tried working after Danny was born, but childcare costs consumed most of my paycheck and Vivian made pointed comments about mothers who prioritized careers over children. Marcus suggested I stay home, just until Danny started school, just until things settled. I agreed, not understanding I was surrendering the independence that made me who I was. Without my own income, I became completely dependent on Marcus's family, which meant dependent on Vivian's approval. Every decision became a negotiation. Danny needed new shoes and I'd buy them at Target, practical and affordable. Vivian would see them at the next family dinner and show up the following week with Italian leather shoes that cost $300 and didn't fit properly. I'd plan Danny's birthday parties with homemade decorations and simple activities, the kind of celebrations I'd loved as a child where imagination mattered more than expense. Vivian would make comments about Wellington family standards, about what appropriate celebrations looked like, about how children needed to understand their social position. The worst part wasn't Vivian's constant criticism. The worst part was watching Marcus transform from the man I married into his mother's son. He stopped defending me in small ways first. When Vivian made cutting remarks about my clothes or my cooking or the way I was raising Danny, Marcus would simply change the subject rather than confront her. Then he started agreeing with her. Maybe Danny should attend better schools. Maybe we should move to the suburbs near his parents. Maybe I should make more effort with his family's social circle. Our apartment in Center City, the one I'd loved for its proximity to museums and libraries and the diverse neighborhood where Danny could grow up understanding different kinds of people, became insufficient. Marcus wanted to buy a house in the mainline suburbs where his family lived, where property values and school districts and country club memberships defined success. I resisted until Vivian made it impossible to refuse, offering to pay the down payment as a gift, the kind of generosity that came with invisible chains. The house was beautiful in the way museum pieces are beautiful, impressive but untouchable. For bedrooms in a gated community where the neighbors smiled politely but never invited us to backyard barbecues. Danny's new school was excellent academically but culturally homogeneous, every child arriving with designer backpacks and vacation stories from European ski resorts. I watched my son learn to be ashamed of things that shouldn't carry shame, apologizing when his clothes weren't the right brands. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When we couldn't afford the same summer camps his classmates attended, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, partly because the isolation was crushing me and partly because Marcus suggested it after I broke down crying at another family dinner where Vivian criticized everything from my posture to my parenting. Dr. Gonzalez was the first person who named what was happening. Financial abuse, she said during our third session. You're being systematically stripped of autonomy and independence through control of economic resources. This isn't just about money. This is about power. The clarity was devastating and liberating simultaneously. I started documenting everything, keeping records of every interaction where Vivian or Marcus used money to control my choices. I started researching my legal rights, discovering that the prenuptial agreement I'd signed had clauses I didn't fully understand, provisions that would leave me with almost nothing if we divorced. I started making plans, tiny acts of rebellion that felt enormous, opening a separate bank account Marcus didn't know about, saving small amounts from the household budget Vivian allocated monthly. Then 6 months ago, everything accelerated. Marcus announced he was accepting a position at Wellington Capital's London office, a promotion his mother had arranged. We'd move in 3 months, Danny would attend boarding school in Switzerland where the Wellington family had connections, I'd finally have opportunities to meet the right kind of people. He presented this as fait accompli, decisions made without my input, my preferences irrelevant to the family's trajectory. I said no. The first time in 5 years of marriage I'd directly refused something Marcus wanted. His confusion was almost comical, as though I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. What do you mean no? This is an incredible opportunity. Your mother arranged this without asking me, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I'm not moving to London. I'm not sending Danny to boarding school. I'm done letting Vivian control our lives. The fight that followed was spectacular, years of suppressed resentment erupting like a volcano. Marcus accused me of being ungrateful, of not understanding the sacrifices his family made to support us, of trying to hold him back from his potential. I accused him of being a coward, of choosing his mother over his wife, of participating in my systematic degradation. He left that night, moved back to his parents' estate, and I knew the marriage was functionally over. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd already consulted with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Thomas Chin, the younger brother of my 8th grade science teacher, who'd built a reputation as Philadelphia's most aggressive family law attorney. Tom specialized in cases involving financial abuse and complex asset division. His initial consultation fee was $500 I didn't have, but when I explained my situation, he agreed to meet for free. Tom reviewed my documentation, the years of records I'd kept, the prenuptial agreement with its one-sided provisions, the evidence of Vivian's financial control. He asked detailed questions about Wellington Capital's structure, about Marcus's actual compensation versus what I'd been told, about the family trusts and offshore accounts I'd overheard mentioned but never fully understood. Then he smiled, the expression of a shark scenting blood in the water. Jessica, he said, I think we have a case that's going to make legal history. The lawsuit Tom filed wasn't just divorce proceedings. It was a comprehensive legal challenge to the financial abuse I'd endured, with claims of fraud in the inducement regarding the prenuptial agreement, claims of intentional infliction of emotional distress, claims of conspiracy between Marcus and Vivian to deprive me of my legal rights. He subpoenaed Wellington Capital's financial records, deposed Marcus's colleagues, hired forensic accountants who discovered Marcus's actual compensation was triple what he'd told me, with the difference flowing into accounts controlled by his mother. The case became exactly what Tom predicted, a landmark proceeding that attracted media attention and set precedents for how courts handle financial abuse in marriages involving significant wealth disparities. Marcus's lawyers tried to dismiss it, tried to enforce the prenuptial agreement, tried to paint me as a gold digger who trapped their client with a pregnancy. But Tom had documentation proving every claim, recordings from therapy sessions where I described the abuse, testimony from Dr. Gonzalez establishing the psychological impact of systematic financial control. 3 weeks ago, the settlement came through. The court invalidated the prenuptial agreement, finding it was signed under duress and contained unconscionable provisions. The judge awarded me 50% of the marital assets including Marcus's partnership stake in Wellington Capital, full custody of Danny with minimal visitation for Marcus until he completed a parenting program, and a provision requiring Vivian to have no contact with either of us for a minimum of 2 years. The total settlement was valued at $43 million, the largest family court award in Pennsylvania history. Tom insisted I keep the settlement confidential until the final paperwork cleared, which happened yesterday. He also insisted on attending Danny's birthday party today, partly as my friend and partly as my attorney, his presence a quiet insurance policy against any Wellington family theatrics. He showed up in jeans and a Superman shirt, bringing Danny an enormous dinosaur encyclopedia my son immediately fell in love with, playing with the kids like he didn't have 3 law degrees and a reputation that made opposing counsel nervous. Which brings us back to this moment, Vivian standing in my modest backyard making comments about cheap toys, unaware that everything has changed, that the daughter-in-law she spent 5 years degrading now has the power to destroy her family's financial empire and the legal protection to live life on her own terms. The silence that follows Vivian's comment stretches like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. I watch Danny's small hand pause halfway to his mouth, a chocolate cupcake with green frosting suspended in air. His eyes find mine across the picnic table decorated with paper plates featuring cartoon dinosaurs, seeking reassurance the way he always does when he senses adult tension he doesn't understand. I force a smile, nodding at him to continue eating, but something fundamental has shifted in the atmosphere of what was supposed to be a joyful afternoon. Vivian stands near the folding table I borrowed from my neighbor, her Chanel suit a stark contrast to the casual attire of every other adult present. Her silver hair is pulled into her signature chignon, pearls at her throat catching the afternoon sunlight filtering through the oak tree I planted 3 years ago when we first moved into this house. She holds a champagne flute filled with the sparkling cider I served for the adults, though from her expression you'd think I'd handed her poison. Marcus hovers behind his mother, his face cycling through emotions I've learned to read over 5 years of marriage. Embarrassment wars with loyalty, the eternal battle that defined our relationship from the beginning. He's wearing khakis and a polo shirt, the Wellington family casual uniform, looking like he stepped out of a country club catalog. 3 months of living at his parents' estate has erased the small traces of individuality he'd cultivated when we first met, the slightly rumpled shirts, the forgotten haircuts, the willingness to eat pizza directly from the box. The other parents at the party exchange glances, those quick meaningful looks adults share when witnessing something inappropriate. There are 8 children total, Danny's friends from the public elementary school he attends now that I've enrolled him after years of fighting with Marcus about expensive private academies. Their parents are teachers, nurses, small business owners, people who work for their living and don't apologize for shopping at discount stores or planning birthday parties on modest budgets. Tom Chin stands near the dessert table, his 6-foot frame relaxed but his eyes sharp with the awareness that comes from years of courtroom battles. He's holding a paper plate with his second cupcake, the Superman logo on his faded t-shirt slightly cracked from repeated washing. To anyone who doesn't know him, he looks like somebody's casual uncle, maybe a high school teacher or an IT professional. Nobody would guess he's the attorney who just secured the largest family court settlement in state history, whose name makes corporate lawyers nervous and whose contingency fee from my case just paid off his own law school debt and funded the expansion of his practice. I set down the plastic dinosaur I'd been holding, one of the party favors I assembled at my kitchen table last night while watching a documentary about ocean life. Each favor bag contains a small toy dinosaur, some stickers, a temporary tattoo, and a handmade bookmark I created using cardstock and markers. They cost approximately $3 per bag to assemble, probably less than Vivian spends on her morning coffee at whatever boutique cafe she frequents. The backyard where we're gathered is small but carefully maintained, a patch of grass bordered by flower beds I planted myself, digging in the dirt on weekends while Danny helped by sorting earthworms into categories based on size. There's a wooden playset I found on Craigslist and refurbished, sanding away splinters and applying fresh paint in primary colors. A small vegetable garden occupies the sunny corner, tomatoes and peppers and herbs growing in neat rows that Danny waters religiously each evening. It's not the manicured lawn of the main line estate where Marcus grew up, with professional landscapers and irrigation systems and imported specimen trees. But it's ours, earned through my settlement, maintained through my labor, filled with life that grows because we tend it. Vivian's comment hangs in the air like smoke, poisoning the atmosphere. Your child looks as cheap as his toys. The cruelty is remarkable even for her, a woman who's made an art form of subtle degradation. But there's nothing subtle about this, no plausible deniability, no way to reframe it as concern or helpful observation. This is pure malice, delivered in front of witnesses, calculated to humiliate both Danny and me. Danny is wearing jeans and a t-shirt featuring his favorite cartoon character, clothes I bought at Target during a back-to-school sale. His sneakers light up when he walks, a feature he adores and demonstrates constantly, stomping around the house making them flash in different colors. His hair needs cutting, dark curls falling into his eyes the way Marcus's did before he started visiting expensive barbers who charged more for a trim than I used to spend on groceries. He looks exactly like what he is, a happy 5-year-old boy celebrating his birthday with friends, unburdened by the toxic obsession with appearances that defines the Wellington family. I realize everyone is waiting for my response, the party frozen like a photograph. This is the moment where the old Jessica would have swallowed the insult, changed the subject, made excuses for Vivian's behavior in the name of keeping peace. The Jessica who spent 5 years walking on eggshells, who learned to preemptively apologize for existing in ways the Wellington family found offensive, who slowly erased herself trying to become acceptable to people who would never accept her. But that Jessica received a phone call 3 weeks ago informing her that the court had ruled in her favor, that the prenuptial agreement was void, that Marcus and Vivian's systematic financial abuse was legally recognized and financially punished. That Jessica now has $43 million in assets, full custody of her son, and a restraining order preventing Vivian from contact. The only reason Vivian is here at all is because I specifically allowed this one final visit before the restraining order takes effect, a courtesy Tom advised against but I insisted upon, wanting Danny to have the chance to say goodbye to his father without drama. Clearly, I overestimated Vivian's capacity for basic human decency. I walk slowly across the yard, aware that every eye follows my movement. My jeans are old, worn soft from repeated washing, paired with a simple green blouse I've owned since college. No designer labels, no expensive accessories, nothing that would meet Wellington family standards for appropriate presentation. My hair is pulled into a ponytail, my face free of the elaborate makeup Vivian always wore to family events, foundation and powder and lipstick applied like armor against the world. When I reach Vivian, I position myself between her and Danny, a physical barrier between her toxicity and my child. She's taller than me by 3 inches, heels adding height to her already imposing frame, but I don't feel small anymore. Money does strange things to your posture, your presence, your willingness to occupy space without apology. Vivian, I say, my voice calm and clear, carrying across the yard to reach every listener. I want to thank you for coming to Danny's party. It's generous of you to take time from your busy schedule to celebrate your grandson's birthday. Her eyes narrow slightly, detecting the shift in my tone, the absence of the deference she's come to expect. Of course I came, she says, her voice saccharine sweet, the way it always sounds when other people are watching. Family is important, even when certain family members have questionable judgment about appropriate celebrations. I smile, the expression genuine because what's about to happen has been building for 5 years and the release feels almost spiritual. You're absolutely right about family being important. That's why I wanted to share some news with everyone here, since we're all gathered together. Marcus takes a step forward, alarm flashing across his features. Jessica, maybe this isn't the time or place for whatever you're planning. Actually, Marcus, this is the perfect time and place. I gesture to the assembled group, parents who've become friends over the past months as our children played together, as we coordinated carpools and shared parenting strategies and built community in ways I never experienced in the isolated wealth of Wellington circles. These people have become my family, more than your actual family ever was. Tom sets down his paper plate and moves slightly closer, not threatening but present, his attorney instincts activated. He knows what I'm about to do because we discussed it this morning over coffee, me asking his legal opinion, him reminding me I don't need anyone's permission to tell my own truth. Vivian makes a dismissive sound, something between a laugh and a scoff. How touching. Your new friends from the discount neighborhoods. I'm sure they're very supportive of your choices. They are, I agree. They're supportive in ways you could never understand. They don't measure a child's worth by the price of his birthday decorations. They don't judge a mother by whether she serves champagne or sparkling cider. They don't think love can be quantified on a balance sheet. One of the other mothers, Sarah, whose daughter Emma is Danny's best friend from kindergarten, makes a small sound of agreement. Sarah works as a nurse at Children's Hospital, pulling overnight shifts to support her 2 kids after her divorce last year. She showed up today with a homemade cake shaped like a triceratops, spending hours on the decoration because Emma insisted Danny would love it. The cake sits on my borrowed table next to my simple cupcakes, both offerings made with care rather than purchased with money. I continue, looking directly at Vivian, holding her gaze the way I never could before. You came into my backyard, into my home, on my son's birthday, and you insulted him. You called him cheap. A 5-year-old child. Your own grandson. Vivian's expression doesn't change, no remorse or recognition of wrongdoing, just cold calculation. I speak truth, Jessica. Perhaps if you'd accepted the help and guidance I offered over the years, if you'd allowed Danny to be raised with proper standards, we wouldn't be in this situation. What situation would that be exactly? I ask, genuine curiosity in my voice. The situation where I'm no longer under your control? Where I don't need Wellington family money to survive? Where I get to make my own decisions about how to raise my son? Marcus steps forward again, his hand reaching toward my arm in a gesture I recognize, the placating touch meant to calm me down and shut me up simultaneously. Jessica, please. Let's not do this here. We can talk privately later. I step back from his reach, the movement instinctive and absolute. No, Marcus. We're not doing that anymore. No more private conversations where you and your mother tell me all the ways I'm insufficient. No more making me feel small so you can feel superior. We're doing this here, now, in front of witnesses. Tom shifts his weight, ready to intervene if needed, but his expression shows approval. We've talked extensively about the importance of public truth-telling, about refusing to protect abusers by hiding their behavior in private. Vivian's cruelty flourished in shadows, in moments without witnesses, in situations where my word against hers would always be dismissed. But here, now, a dozen people heard what she said, saw the casual cruelty she inflicted on a child. Danny has abandoned his cupcake and moved to stand beside Sarah's daughter Emma, both children watching the adult confrontation with worried faces. I hate that he's witnessing this, hate that his birthday has been contaminated by Wellington family toxicity, but I also know that protecting him means showing him that standing up to bullies is possible, that cruel words don't have to be accepted in silence. Vivian sets down her champagne flute with deliberate care, the crystal making a soft clink against the folding table. I see what this is. You've decided to throw some sort of tantrum because you're unhappy with your circumstances. How typical of your background, making scenes instead of handling matters with dignity. My background, I repeat, tasting the contempt in her words. You mean the background where my mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads? Where I earned a scholarship to college through actual merit rather than family connections? Where I learned that a person's value has nothing to do with their bank account? The other parents are watching now with open interest, no longer pretending to focus on their children or the party activities. This is better than any reality television show, real conflict unfolding in real time. I can see sympathy on several faces, recognition in others, particularly from the mothers who've shared their own stories of difficult in-laws and controlling partners. Anyone can get a scholarship, Vivian says, her voice dripping disdain. Participation trophies for the masses. What matters is what you do with opportunities, and you've squandered every chance Marcus and I gave you to better yourself. Better myself, I say softly, then louder. Better myself according to what standard? Yours? The standard that measures human worth by country club memberships and designer labels? The standard that thinks a child is cheap because his toys came from a regular store instead of some boutique charging obscene markups? Tom catches my eye and gives a small nod, the signal we agreed upon. This is the moment we discussed, the pivot point where I share the information that will detonate Vivian's carefully constructed superiority. I take a breath, feeling surprisingly calm despite the magnitude of what I'm about to reveal. Since we're speaking about finances and worth and who gets to judge whom, I think everyone here should know about the court settlement that was finalized yesterday. Marcus goes pale, actually pale, color draining from his face like water from a tub. No, Jessica. Don't. But I'm already talking, words flowing like a river breaking through a dam. 3 weeks ago, a judge ruled on my divorce case. Tom Chin, who some of you might have noticed eating cupcakes very enthusiastically over there, represented me in what the legal community is calling a landmark case about financial abuse in marriage. Tom waves cheerfully, still holding his Superman plate. The dinosaur encyclopedia he brought Danny sits on the gift table next to much simpler offerings from other families, books from the library sale, art supplies from the craft store, a soccer ball, a package of glow sticks. Everything chosen with thought about what Danny would actually enjoy rather than what would impress observers. The court invalidated the prenuptial agreement I signed, I continue, finding strength in each word. An agreement I signed in a courthouse bathroom while pregnant, terrified, and completely dependent on the Wellington family's approval. The judge found that the agreement was signed under duress and contained unconscionable provisions designed to leave me with nothing if the marriage failed. Vivian's expression finally cracks, shock replacing her usual mask of cold superiority. You can't possibly think that settlement will stand. We have lawyers, the best money can buy. You had lawyers, I correct her. Very expensive lawyers who argued that I was a gold digger, that I trapped Marcus with a pregnancy, that I didn't deserve anything beyond what your unconscionable prenup stipulated. Tom and his team of forensic accountants had a different story to tell. I gesture to the modest backyard, the simple party decorations, the children playing on my refurbished playset. This house, this party, this life you find so contemptible, represents freedom you can't comprehend. I'm not dependent on Wellington money anymore. I don't need Marcus's allowance or your approval or access to family accounts you controlled like weapons. Sarah and several other parents are smiling now, understanding dawning as they piece together what I'm revealing. The whispers among Marcus's social circles have probably already started spreading, gossip about the divorce settlement, but here in my backyard with my actual friends, I get to control the narrative. The settlement was $43 million, I say, letting the number land like a bomb. 50% of marital assets including Marcus's partnership stake in Wellington Capital, full custody of Danny, and a court order preventing Vivian from any contact with us for a minimum of 2 years. The silence is absolute. Even the children have stopped playing, sensing something significant is happening though they can't understand the details. Danny looks at me with wide eyes, still young enough that millions means nothing to him but old enough to recognize that the numbers have changed something fundamental. Vivian sways slightly, her hand reaching for the table edge to steady herself. That's impossible. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Our lawyers assured us. Your lawyers didn't account for documentation of systematic financial abuse, I tell her. 5 years of records showing how you and Marcus controlled every aspect of my life through money. Therapy transcripts describing the psychological impact. Evidence that Marcus was hiding his actual compensation, with the difference flowing into accounts you controlled. The court found a pattern of fraud, emotional abuse, and conspiracy to deprive me of my legal rights. Marcus finds his voice, though it comes out strangled. You planned this. All of it. You manipulated everything. I documented reality, I correct him. I kept records of every conversation where money was used to control my choices. Every time your mother questioned my purchases or required justification for basic needs. Every instance where you told me we couldn't afford something while hiding millions in accounts I didn't know existed. That's not manipulation, Marcus. That's evidence. Tom steps forward now, his casual demeanor shifting to something more professional. For the record, since Mrs. Wellington seems confused about the legal standing, the settlement is final. All appeals were exhausted. The court order preventing contact goes into effect tomorrow morning. This gathering today was specifically permitted as a final opportunity for Mr. Wellington to see his son before supervised visitation arrangements begin. Vivian turns to Tom, seeing him clearly for the first time, recognition dawning as she realizes this casually dressed man eating cupcakes is the attorney who dismantled her family's legal strategy. You're Tom Chen. I've heard about you. You specialize in these sorts of cases, encouraging gold diggers to extort money from successful families. Tom's smile doesn't reach his eyes. I specialize in protecting victims of financial abuse, Mrs. Wellington. And for the record, Jessica didn't extort anything. The court reviewed extensive evidence and determined that she was systematically deprived of her legal rights. The settlement reflects what she was always entitled to under Pennsylvania law, had your family not committed fraud to prevent her from accessing it. This is outrageous, Vivian sputters, her composure fully shattered now. We'll challenge this. We'll take it to higher courts. We'll expose this farce. Feel free to try, Tom says mildly. Though I should mention that any public discussion of the case details might violate the confidentiality provisions your own lawyers insisted upon. The settlement protects certain Wellington Capital business information from disclosure. If you challenge the agreement publicly, those protections become void and some very interesting details about your family's financial practices might become public record. The threat lands precisely as Tom intended. Vivian's face cycles through emotions, rage and fear battling for dominance. Marcus places a hand on his mother's shoulder, whether to steady her or restrain her I can't tell. The power dynamic has inverted so completely that the backyard feels like a different universe from the one we occupied 10 minutes ago. I turn away from them both, done with confrontation, and walk to where Danny stands with Emma. My son's face shows confusion mixed with something that might be pride, though he's too young to fully understand what just transpired. I kneel down to his level, brushing curls from his forehead with gentle fingers. Are you okay, baby? I ask quietly, aware that every adult is still watching but no longer caring about their judgment. Danny nods slowly, then whispers, Is Grandma leaving now? Yes, sweetie. Grandma is leaving. But your friends are still here and we still have presents to open and games to play. This is still your special day. Sarah moves to stand beside us, her hand briefly touching my shoulder in solidarity. Emma tugs Danny toward the gift table, chattering about the soccer ball her family brought, and gradually the normal sounds of children playing resume. The other parents begin moving again, conversations restarting, though I catch sympathetic glances and small smiles of approval. Marcus approaches slowly, his expression devastated in ways I haven't seen since Danny's birth. Jessica, can we talk? Just for a moment? Please. I stand, crossing my arms, maintaining physical distance. You have 5 minutes before the party activities resume. Tom stays within earshot. Marcus runs his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from college days before Vivian trained it out of him. I didn't know about the hidden accounts. I swear I didn't know she was controlling things that way. My father handles most of the financial details and I just trusted their accounting. The excuse is so perfectly Marcus, avoiding responsibility by claiming ignorance, that I almost laugh. You knew enough. You knew what I was allowed to spend and what required permission. You knew your mother questioned every purchase I made. You stood silent while she systematically stripped away my independence. I never thought of it that way, he says weakly. I thought she was trying to help, teaching you how our world works. Your world, I correct. Not mine. Never mine. I tried for 5 years to fit into the Wellington mold and it nearly destroyed me. The only thing that saved me was realizing I didn't want to fit anymore. Vivian has recovered enough composure to approach, though she maintains careful distance from Tom. This isn't over, Jessica. You may have won a legal battle through manipulation and lies, but you'll never be anything other than what you are. Common. Cheap. Unworthy of the Wellington name. The words should hurt, but they bounce off like rain on glass. I'm no longer the woman who measured her worth by Wellington approval. You're right, Vivian. I'll never be a Wellington. Thank God for that. I'd rather be common and free than wealthy and miserable like you. Tom clears his throat, his lawyer voice emerging. Mrs. Wellington, Mr. Wellington, I need to remind you that as of tomorrow morning, this type of contact violates a court order. I suggest you say your goodbyes and leave before you complicate matters further. Marcus looks at Danny, who's now engaged in a game involving the plastic dinosaurs I'd worried were too cheap. My son's laughter rings clear and genuine, uncontaminated by the adult drama surrounding him. Can I at least tell him goodbye properly? I consider refusing, then decide Danny deserves that closure regardless of my feelings about his father. You can say goodbye. Keep it brief and age-appropriate. Nothing about the legal situation. Marcus walks to where Danny plays, kneeling down to his level the way I just did. I watch as he speaks softly to our son, Danny nodding seriously at whatever his father says. They hug, Danny's small arms wrapping around Marcus's neck, and despite everything, my heart aches for the family we might have been if Marcus had found courage to stand up to his mother years ago. Vivian doesn't approach Danny. She stands rigid near the gate, her expensive suit armor against a world that no longer bends to her will. When Marcus finishes his goodbye and rejoins her, they leave without further comment, the gate clicking shut behind them with gentle finality. The party resumes its rhythm. Sarah organizes a treasure hunt using clues I'd written the night before, sending children scurrying around the yard searching for plastic eggs containing small prizes. Tom helps referee a game involving the sprinkler and water balloons, his Superman shirt getting soaked while children shriek with delight. Other parents chat on the patio, discussing school schedules and summer plans with the easy familiarity of people who genuinely like each other. I stand at the edge of the yard, watching Danny run through sprinkler spray with his friends, his laughter pure joy. This is what childhood should look like. Messy and loud and filled with wonder at simple pleasures. Not the carefully orchestrated events Vivian preferred, where children were decorative accessories to adult networking. Later, after the guests have departed and Tom helps me clean up paper plates and deflated balloons, he brings up what we've both been thinking. You know the Wellington family won't give up easily. They'll look for ways to challenge the settlement, to make your life difficult within legal boundaries. Let them try, I say, tying off a garbage bag. I'm not afraid anymore. The worst they could do was take my money and my independence. Now I have both and they can't touch either. Tom smiles, that shark expression returning. You've changed. The woman I met 6 months ago was terrified and beaten down. This woman just publicly dismantled her abusers without breaking a sweat. I had good teachers, I tell him. My mother taught me resilience. Dr. Gonzalez taught me to recognize abuse. You taught me I had legal recourse. And Vivian, ironically, taught me exactly how not to treat people I claim to love. After Tom leaves, I find Danny in his room, surrounded by birthday presents, carefully examining the dinosaur encyclopedia. He looks up when I enter, his expression thoughtful in that way children get when processing complex emotions. Mom, he says carefully, was Grandma mean to you? I sit beside him on the floor, choosing honesty over comfortable lies. Yes, baby. Grandma said mean things because she was angry about changes she can't control. But those mean things aren't true. You're perfect exactly as you are. I liked my party, Danny announces. It was fun. Better than the fancy ones Grandma wanted. I'm glad, sweetie. That's what matters. Not expensive decorations or fancy venues, but having fun with people who care about you. Danny nods seriously, then returns to his book, already moving past adult complications into the uncomplicated joy of learning about prehistoric creatures. I stay beside him, watching evening light paint gold across his features, thinking about the future we've just secured. The settlement money sits in accounts I control, managed by financial advisors Tom recommended. Enough to ensure Danny's education, to fund my community programs, to live comfortably without luxury's corrupting influence. I've already started planning expansion of the after-school art program I volunteer with, thinking about scholarships for kids from backgrounds like mine, about creating opportunities that don't require wealthy benefactors' approval. My phone buzzes with a text from Sarah. That was the most badass thing I've ever witnessed. Coffee tomorrow? I want to hear the whole story. I smile, responding affirmatively, feeling gratitude for friendships built on mutual respect rather than social obligation. This is the life I choose. Modest homes and homemade birthday parties and friendships earned through authenticity rather than purchased through status. Tomorrow the restraining order takes effect and Vivian Wellington officially exits our lives. Marcus will maintain supervised visitation until he completes parenting classes the court mandated, learning to prioritize his son over his mother's expectations. Eventually, he might become the father Danny deserves. But that's his journey to make. Mine led through humiliation and abuse to this moment, standing in a small house with my son, financially secure and emotionally free. Vivian thought she could break me with cruelty and control. Instead, she taught me exactly how strong I could become when I stopped seeking her approval and started believing in my own worth. Danny looks up from his book, reaches for my hand, and smiles. Best birthday ever, he declares with the certainty only 5-year-olds possess. And you know what? He's absolutely right. The week following Danny's birthday party unfolds with a strange mixture of relief and residual tension, like the atmosphere after a thunderstorm has passed but the air still crackles with electricity. I wake each morning in the small house I chose myself, sunlight streaming through curtains I hung without asking anyone's permission, and the simple act of making coffee in my own kitchen feels revolutionary. For 5 years, every decision required consultation, approval, justification to people who viewed my preferences as character flaws requiring correction. Now I choose everything, from the brand of cereal in my pantry to the color of towels in my bathroom, and these trivial freedoms carry weight I never anticipated. Danny adjusts to our new normal with the resilience children possess when adults provide stability. He asks about his father occasionally, simple questions I answer honestly without burdening him with adult complexities. Marcus calls on schedule for their supervised video visits, speaking to Danny about school and dinosaurs and carefully neutral topics while a court-appointed monitor ensures compliance with custody arrangements. I watch these conversations from the doorway, seeing glimpses of the man I married buried under layers of Wellington family programming, wondering if he'll ever excavate his authentic self or remain forever his mother's creation. The restraining order against Vivian brings unexpected peace. No more unannounced visits where she'd inspect my home like a health department official documenting violations. No more phone calls questioning my parenting decisions or suggesting improvements to my inadequate lifestyle. No more family dinners where I'd brace myself for casual cruelty delivered between courses of expensive food I couldn't taste through anxiety. Her absence creates space for me to breathe, to remember who I was before Wellington family dynamics compressed me into something unrecognizable. Tom Chen becomes an unexpected friend beyond his role as my attorney. He stops by one evening with Chinese takeout and fortune cookies, sprawling on my second-hand couch like he's known me for decades rather than months. We eat directly from containers while Danny shows Tom his growing dinosaur collection, explaining in elaborate detail the differences between herbivores and carnivores. After Danny goes to bed, Tom and I talk about his own journey from the son of immigrants who worked in restaurants to a Harvard Law graduate who chose family law over corporate practice specifically to help people trapped in situations like mine. My mother cleaned houses for families like the Wellingtons, Tom tells me, his voice carrying old anger polished smooth by time and success. She'd come home with stories about their waste, their casual cruelty to service workers, their absolute certainty that money made them better than everyone else. I went to law school to prove that legal systems could protect people my mother served, that wealth doesn't place anyone above accountability. His words resonate deeply because they articulate something I've struggled to express. The Wellington family didn't just have money. They weaponized it, used it to establish hierarchy, to control outcomes, to insulate themselves from consequences. Vivian genuinely believed her wealth made her superior, that financial resources equated to moral authority, that she had the right to reshape people into versions she found acceptable. Fighting back wasn't just about securing my financial future. It was about refusing the fundamental premise that money determines human value. I start therapy with Dr. Gonzalez twice weekly instead of monthly, unpacking 5 years of accumulated trauma now that I have resources to afford consistent treatment. She helps me understand that what I experienced wasn't just difficult in-laws or marital problems but systematic psychological abuse designed to destroy my sense of self-worth. The financial control was merely the mechanism. The actual goal was making me believe I was fundamentally defective, that my background made me less than, that I should be grateful for Wellington family tolerance of my existence. Abusers convince victims that abuse is love, Dr. Gonzalez explains during one session. They frame control as protection, criticism as guidance, isolation as intimacy. You started believing that Vivian's cruelty was somehow for your own good, that if you just tried harder to meet her standards, she'd finally accept you. The recognition hits hard because it's absolutely accurate. I'd internalized Wellington family values, started judging myself by their metrics, measuring my worth against standards specifically designed to ensure my failure. No matter what I did, it would never be sufficient because the point wasn't improvement. The point was permanent subordination. But sitting in Dr. Gonzalez's office, surrounded by plants and soft lighting and the gentle validation of someone who sees my humanity clearly, I begin reconstructing my sense of self. I'm not defective for preferring Target to Bergdorf Goodman. I'm not inadequate for finding joy in simple birthday parties rather than elaborate events. I'm not failing Danny by raising him with values centered on kindness rather than status. The Wellington family worldview is distorted, not mine. I reconnect with my mother, who still lives in South Philadelphia, still works too much though I've offered repeatedly to help her retire. She visits one Saturday, bringing homemade empanadas and the particular brand of unconditional love that characterized my entire childhood. Danny adores his grandmother Elena, fascinated by her stories about growing up in Puerto Rico before moving to Philadelphia as a teenager, her descriptions of poverty so profound it makes our previous struggles seem trivial. "You did good, Mija," my mother tells me while we watch Danny play in the backyard. "You protected yourself and your son. That takes courage most people never find." Her approval means everything because it comes without conditions, without expectation that I become someone other than who I am. My mother loved me when I had nothing to offer except my existence. She sacrificed everything so I could access opportunities she never had. And now, with resources I once couldn't imagine, I can finally reciprocate that generosity in tangible ways. I set up a trust fund for my mother, enough to ensure comfortable retirement and access to healthcare and the security she never had while raising me alone. She cries when I tell her, protesting that she doesn't need charity, that she's managed fine all these years. But I insist this isn't charity. It's repayment for countless sacrifices, acknowledgement of love that asked nothing in return, recognition that her definition of success, raising a daughter who knows her worth, matters more than any Wellington family metric. The settlement money also funds expansion of the after-school art program where I've volunteered for years. The program serves kids from low-income neighborhoods, providing free art supplies and instruction to children whose schools have eliminated creative education due to budget cuts. I've seen firsthand how art transforms young lives, giving children tools to process trauma, express emotions they lack vocabulary to articulate, imagine futures beyond their current circumstances. With proper funding, we expand from one location to 5, hire professional teaching artists, purchase quality supplies instead of making do with donated scraps. I work directly with program development, drawing on my own childhood experiences to create curriculum that honors students' backgrounds while expanding their possibilities. These kids don't need rescuing or pity. They need resources and respect and adults who believe in their potential. One afternoon, working with a group of 8-year-olds on self-portrait projects, I watch a girl named Destiny carefully mix colors to match her skin tone. She's been in foster care for 3 years, bouncing between homes, carrying trauma in her small body that manifests in nightmares and difficulty trusting adults. But when she paints, something shifts in her expression. The hypervigilance eases. Her shoulders relax. She becomes fully present in ways I rarely observe during regular programming. "Ms. Jessica," Destiny says, holding up her painting for my inspection. I made myself looking brave. The portrait shows a girl with crown, standing tall, surrounded by flowers and stars. It's beautiful not because of technical skill but because of what it represents. This child, who has every reason to feel powerless, has created an image of herself as strong and worthy and capable of courage. "You are brave," I tell her, meaning it completely. So incredibly brave. Watching Destiny beam with pride, I understand viscerally why the settlement matters beyond my personal liberation. This money came from a family that hoarded wealth, that used resources to establish dominance, that measured human value in dollars. Now it funds programs teaching children like Destiny that their worth isn't determined by their circumstances, that creativity and resilience and authentic self-expression matter more than any external marker of success. Sarah and I develop a genuine friendship, meeting for coffee while our kids are in school, sharing the particular intimacy of single mothers navigating life after difficult marriages. She understands financial abuse from her own experience, her ex-husband having controlled money in ways that left her responsible for all debt while he had assets in his mother's name. Her nursing salary barely covers rent and childcare, but she's rebuilding with the same determined resilience I recognize from my own journey. "Sometimes I'm so angry," Sarah confesses one morning, stirring sugar into her coffee with more force than necessary. "Angry that I stayed so long, that I believed him when he said I was the problem, that I let him convince me I'd never manage alone." I reach across the table, covering her hand with mine. "You did the best you could with the information you had. Abusers are experts at manipulation. It's not your fault you trusted someone you loved." Her eyes fill with tears. She blinks away quickly, nurse instincts kicking in to manage emotions efficiently. "How do you do it? How do you move past the anger?" The question makes me pause because I'm not sure I have moved past it completely. Some days I wake furious about 5 years stolen by Wellington family toxicity. Other days I feel grateful that the situation wasn't worse, that I found the courage to leave before Danny internalized their values, that Tom Chen existed and fought for justice when I couldn't fight for myself. "I don't think we move past it," I finally answer. "I think we integrate it." The anger becomes fuel for building something better. The hurt becomes empathy for others experiencing similar pain. The shame transforms into determination that our children won't repeat our patterns. Sarah nods slowly, processing this framework. "Your settlement, the money, does it help? Does having financial security make the emotional recovery easier?" It's a question I've asked myself repeatedly. The answer is complicated. Yes, money helps tremendously because it removes immediate survival stress. I don't worry about rent or food or Danny's healthcare. I can afford quality therapy and legal protection and the breathing room to heal without constant crisis management. But money doesn't erase the damage. It doesn't automatically repair my ability to trust or restore my demolished self-esteem or undo years of systematic degradation. Money solves money problems, I tell Sarah. It doesn't solve the psychological impact of abuse. But it does create space for healing that's really hard to access when you're focused on basic survival. She laughs, the sound bitter but understanding. "Well, I'm still firmly in survival mode. Maybe in 5 years I'll have the luxury of processing trauma instead of just enduring it." Her comment haunts me for days because it highlights the profound inequality in how we recover from similar situations. My settlement, the resources it provides, represents privilege Sarah doesn't have access to despite working as hard as I do, despite being equally deserving of security. The difference isn't merit or effort. It's that I happened to marry into wealth, however temporarily, and had an exceptional attorney willing to fight for unprecedented settlement terms. This realization drives me to establish a legal fund through Tom's practice, providing free or reduced cost representation for people experiencing financial abuse in relationships. Tom agrees to administer it, his eyes lighting up at the possibility of replicating my case's success for clients who couldn't otherwise afford his services. We structure it to cover not just legal fees but also expert witnesses, forensic accountants, therapy costs, and temporary housing for people fleeing dangerous situations. You're creating systemic change, Tom says when we finalize the fund structure. Not just helping individual cases but building infrastructure to challenge how courts handle financial abuse. His words capture something essential about my evolving understanding of justice. Personal liberation isn't enough when systems remain unchanged. Vivian Wellington and people like her will continue wielding financial control as weapon unless legal frameworks exist to recognize and punish this abuse. Every case Tom wins using this fund establishes precedent, educates judges, shifts cultural understanding about what constitutes legitimate grounds for intervention. Danny thrives in ways that validate every difficult decision I made. He's gentler now, less anxious about making mistakes or disappointing adults. His teacher calls to tell me he's been helping other students who struggle with reading, patiently explaining concepts with the kindness I've tried to model. He still loves dinosaurs with passionate intensity, but he's also discovered interest in space exploration, marine biology, and Egyptian history, his curiosity encouraged rather than redirected towards socially acceptable pursuits. One evening, helping Danny with homework at our kitchen table, he asks a question that stops my heart. "Mom, why did Dad let Grandma be mean to you?" The question is so perceptive, so precisely targeted at the core issue, that I'm momentarily speechless. Danny watches me with those dark eyes that miss nothing, waiting for truth he somehow knows I'll provide. "That's a really good question, baby," I say slowly, choosing words carefully. Sometimes people don't stand up to their parents even when they should. Your dad loves his mom very much, and sometimes that love made it hard for him to see when she was being unkind. But you stood up to her, Danny points out with 5-year-old logic. At my party. You told her the truth. I did. And that was scary but necessary. Sometimes we have to be brave even when it's hard, especially to protect people we love. Danny considers this, his expression thoughtful. I'm glad you protected me. Grandma Vivian made me feel bad sometimes, like I was doing everything wrong. The admission breaks my heart because it confirms fears I've carried. Vivian's toxicity wasn't just directed at me. It contaminated Danny's sense of self, teaching him to measure his worth against impossible standards, to apologize for normal childhood behavior, to believe that love requires perfect performance. You never did anything wrong, I tell him fiercely, pulling him into a hug. Grandma's opinions say nothing about you and everything about her. You're perfect exactly as you are. We sit like that for a long moment, my son in my arms, both of us healing from wounds inflicted by people who claim to love us. This is what generational trauma looks like, I realize. Vivian's parents probably treated her this way, valued her only for maintaining family image, crushed authentic self-expression in favor of social acceptability. She repeated these patterns with Marcus, who internalized them so completely he couldn't recognize abuse when he perpetuated it. And the cycle would have continued with Danny if I hadn't found strength to break it. The responsibility feels enormous. I'm not just raising one child. I'm disrupting patterns that might stretch back generations, creating new templates for what love looks like, modeling the revolutionary act of unconditional acceptance. Some days this weight exhausts me. Other days it feels like the most important work I'll ever do. 6 months after the settlement, I'm invited to speak at a conference about financial abuse in intimate relationships. Tom encouraged me to share my story publicly, arguing that visibility helps other victims recognize their situations and seek help. I'm terrified of public speaking, of opening myself to judgment, of giving Wellington family ammunition they might use to paint me as vindictive or attention-seeking. But I agree because silence protects abusers. Because shame flourishes in secrecy. Because my story isn't unique, and telling it might help someone else find courage to leave their own dangerous situation. Standing on stage in front of 200 people, mostly domestic violence advocates and family law attorneys, I share details I've barely processed privately. The systematic erosion of my independence. The constant criticism disguised as guidance. The way financial control became psychological torture. The shame that kept me silent even when I knew something was profoundly wrong. I talk about my mother's sacrifices and the scholarship that changed my trajectory and meeting Marcus when I still believed love could bridge any difference. I describe the slow realization that I'd married not just a man but his family's entire toxic system, that Vivian viewed me as threat to her control over her son, that no amount of accommodation would ever make me acceptable to people fundamentally opposed to my existence. And I talk about finding Tom Chen, about documentation and depositions and the terrifying vulnerability of trusting legal systems to recognize abuse that leaves no physical marks. About the judge who listened and ruled that financial control constitutes legitimate grounds for intervention. About the settlement that restored not just my money but my belief that justice sometimes exists for people without power. The audience is silent throughout, the kind of focused attention that indicates people are actually listening rather than waiting to speak. When I finish, the applause is thunderous, sustained, people rising to their feet in acknowledgement that feels almost overwhelming. Afterward, dozens of women approach me, sharing their own stories. A doctor whose husband controlled her income despite earning less. A teacher whose partner hid money while she struggled to buy groceries. A lawyer whose mother-in-law used family wealth to dictate every life decision. Each story unique in details but devastatingly similar in structure, proving that financial abuse crosses all demographics, that wealth doesn't protect against intimate violence, that control takes many forms. You gave me language for what I'm experiencing, one woman tells me, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was crazy, ungrateful, unreasonable. But hearing you describe financial abuse, I finally understand it's not me. It's him. These conversations, these moments of recognition and validation, confirm that telling my story matters beyond personal catharsis. Every woman who leaves an abusive situation because she heard my testimony and realized she wasn't alone represents ripples extending from choices I made. The settlement isn't just about my liberation. It's about establishing precedent that helps others seek their own. Standing in the conference center, surrounded by survivors and advocates, I think about the journey from that engagement party where my father called me a failure to this moment where my experiences might help create systemic change. The path wasn't linear or easy. It required courage I didn't know I possessed, support from people like Tom and Dr. Gonzalez and my mother, and the particular clarity that comes from reaching a breaking point where staying causes more damage than leaving. I think about Vivian, wherever she is, probably still convinced she did nothing wrong, still certain that wealth justifies control, still unable to recognize that love without respect is just another form of violence. I hope Marcus eventually finds courage to examine his own complicity, to break free from his mother's programming, to become the father Danny deserves. But I've accepted that their healing isn't my responsibility. My job is protecting Danny and rebuilding myself and using resources I fought for to help others fighting similar battles. This is what triumph looks like, I realize. Not the settlement money, though that matters. Not the public vindication, though that helps. But the quiet daily act of choosing myself, of refusing to shrink for others' comfort, of building a life centered on authentic values rather than others' expectations. Success isn't measured in dollars or social status. It's measured in peace, in joy, in the freedom to make mistakes without fearing punishment, in raising a child who knows his worth regardless of external validation. The journey from that backyard birthday party to this conference stage taught me that our worthiest battles aren't against external enemies but against internalized lies about our own inadequacy. Vivian couldn't destroy me because I finally stopped believing her narratives about my deficiency. Marcus couldn't control me because I stopped seeking his approval. The Wellington family lost power over my life the moment I recognized that their standards were arbitrary, their judgment meaningless, their wealth unable to purchase what actually matters. And what matters, ultimately, is love without conditions, creativity without apology, and the courage to define success on your own terms. Everything else is just noise, expensive and impressive noise perhaps, but noise nonetheless. I'd rather live in my small house with second-hand furniture and homemade birthday parties, surrounded by people who value authenticity over appearance, than return to the gilded cage of Wellington expectations. This is my truth. This is my triumph. And every day I wake up free from financial abuse, every moment I spend with Danny building genuine rather than performative childhood memories, every survivor I help recognize their worth beyond what abusers claim, proves that the hardest battles yield the most meaningful victories. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.